That's right. We are back, bigger, better than ever. Jeff Chadiha, even from his home, no longer in Los Angeles, hobnobbing with stars. It is the Red, Gold, and Bold podcast, episode 37 this week. With us, as always, Jeff Chadiha from the NFL Network, NFL.com. You can follow him at Jeffrey Chadiha. Eric Eager for Pro Football Focus, PFF.com. You can follow him at PFF_Eric. My name is Soren Petro. Sports Radio 810 WHB in Kansas City. You can hear me at 810WHB.com. Follow me at Soren Petro, SORENPETRO. Jeff, Eric, how are you, gentlemen?
Good. It's good to be back.
Yeah, good trip to LA. Was everything to your liking?
It was a little surprise there at the end where people don't follow me on Instagram. We had our NFL Talent Summit, and surprise guests second day were a couple Beverly Hills 90210 former stars. Never watched the show, but I know the names Tori Spelling and Jenny Garth. So that was a big perk, big boost to the end of the day, giving us podcast advice. It's always funny how people who are famous, who have big time shows in the 90s, give you great podcast advice. You know, you have a hit show if you just do that.
Anything you want to share with us on the advice, since we're getting ready to do or are doing our podcast? Any tremendous nugget we should know for Eric and I?
Well, there was an older guy sitting next to him, a longtime radio guy, who said Adam Carolla once told him to have a great podcast, you need three things: be famous, and be famous. That was the takeaway.
Look, Soren, what was that bar that we went to before the 2019 AFC title game where everybody remembered? Everybody, like 5 people recognized my voice from your show. I feel like we're halfway there.
Yeah, I think so. I think that's where it is. Stars of yesterday, giving the tips on how to make it all go in the world of podcasting. That's absolutely fantastic. I love it. So I guess we'll do something to get more famous. Will be the key here if we're to make it all happen right away. All right, let's get things going. A little addition of fill in the blank, what we came up with for today. We decided that basically we would take the major topics coming out of Chiefs minicamp, looking ahead to the Kansas City Chiefs training camp in St. Joe, Missouri, and we would fill in the blanks. So let's get things started. We'll begin with number one. The drama surrounding Tyreek Hill's podcast comments was blank. Jeff, you want to lead us off here on this one?
I would say predictable. And look, you knew that Tyreek Hill, when he was here, was always a little bit of a loose cannon. They kept him under control. I vividly remember the championship game parade where he got a chance to speak, and it was almost like you had like parents holding back a 5-year-old kid at a Christmas party or something, just getting ready to cut loose, so concerned about what he was going to say. So you knew once he had the freedom and the platform, he was going to say something crazy. I don't have a problem with what he says. I don't believe a lot of what he said. I don't think it should bother the Chiefs or Chiefs fans, but I recognize that it's a slow off season. It's a slow news cycle. Andy Reid went off on one of your colleagues, one of my friends, Todd Lebo, as part of this story. So this thing has been given legs by a lot of different people, but ultimately it's just another wide receiver with a big ego talking a lot of shit.
Yeah. It's funny how that position just lends itself to it. Spoken from a true defensive back, by the way.
Yeah.
A little bit of the memories of going up against the wideouts there. Eric, how about you? The drama surrounding Tyreek Hill's podcast comments was what?
As a high school wide receiver and a college tight end, I feel adjacent, at least, to the drama. I remember growing up in Minnesota when the Vikings traded Randy Moss to Oakland, and it came out. This was right after a year in which Dante Culpepper threw for 4,700 yards and 39 touchdowns, which is a big deal back then. And Randy Moss reportedly said that Kerry Collins was a better player than Dante Culpepper. This is like, I don't know what he's supposed to say. Like, hey, look, I like my quarterback now. Like there's not exactly a lot of nuance, and maybe there's no value in nuance. Like, what does Tyreek Hill get for being thought of as smart by us? I don't know. So like maybe there's maybe it's just the natural thing to do to defend his new QB. But man, I think that entire thing was kind of hilarious.
Yeah, I like predictable. I think that's a strong one, but I don't want to just cop out and take Jeff's. So that I think that's unfair. I'll go with the drama surrounding Tyreek Hill's podcast comments was I don't want to say poorly handled.
That's a good one.
It was. I'll say that. I'll say poorly handled because I think it was poorly handled on a lot of levels. Andy Reid drew attention to it. It could have gone away with the way Andy Reid answered it later after more comments came out. He did a much better job, and I think Andy Reid poured gas on this fire, and I think it could have been, a lot less of a thing in and around Kansas City, as you mentioned. He called a colleague of mine a shock jock, and he's anything but a shock jock. And so that just gave you. Then the subject. Then we spent a news cycle talking about Andy Reid's comments, which kept the Tyreek comments alive. And so I think that was poor. But I also think it was poor by his agent, Drew Rosenhaus. Like, why? Drew Rosenhaus is supposed to be the adult in the room, right? You can get it if a young 20-something-year-old guy and I don't know who the other guy is, but I'm assuming he's wanting to, have a bit of a career in the broadcast field or the podcast field. You can understand why they're going to go after things, but to sensationalize it, leaving it dangling out there, and then for Tyreek Hill to immediately say, well, that's not where I was going with it. I think is just. I think it's I think it's bad form, and I don't know how an experienced NFL agent could let that go. So I was surprised. I know Drew Rosenhaus is the guy who was on the phone acting like he was getting calls about Willis McGahee. I know he does a great job of promoting for his clients, and I know he's not above showmanship and that kind of thing to get it done. But I don't know where he helped his client. I don't know where going into Miami. Like Miami's all excited. There's a honeymoon right now. They're going to love him. But they basically just announced if it goes sideways here, he's going to get loud and he's going to be chirping on a podcast. And to Jeff, your point, I'll go a step further at the Super Bowl parade. For those that weren't around watching it, Mitch Holthus, who's the play-by-play guy for the Kansas City Chiefs, I mean, I felt like he was about to fall off the stage himself trying to get the microphone away from him. That's how concerned I felt like they were that he was going to say something ridiculous. And so now he's unleashed on Miami. And listen, Jalen Waddle is there playing a similar position. And if they're a few games in and Tua isn't more accurate than Patrick Mahomes, as he said, I can really see a scenario where you're 3 games in and he's 11 catches for 134 yards, no touchdowns, and people are going, what the hell? And he's now in the habit of saying whatever comes to mind, in the habit of not censoring himself. I would look out for that. By the way, I like Sean's password is clickbait. I like that. Clickbait is definitely one of the things that could be said. But I think it was poorly handled. I mean, that's where I'd leave on that one.
Well, I think Brian Meyer, I can't make sure I'm saying his name correctly. He makes a good point that the one thing that was surprising, not just with Mahomes, but with Andy's response to Todd Lebo the first time, it did seem to get under their skin in a way that I think if you're either one of those guys, you need to just let it go. It's not a big deal. Move on. And I can understand where, especially if you're Andy Reid, that you really stood up for this guy, really went through some battles with him publicly and legally and stood by him. And maybe this was just a bridge too far. Maybe LaShawn McCoy saying what he said. Maybe Le'Veon Bell a year ago saying what he said. Maybe he's just tired of people coming out and bashing the organization and him after they leave town. But it did seem to be that they should be able to move beyond this and be above it and just say they know the guy. They should know it. That's why it's predictable. You know what he's going to do.
Yeah, and they did seem to be surprised by it. Let's go to number 2, which is Patrick Mahomes' response. Mahomes' response to these comments was what, Eric?
I just think, Pat, I mean, this is going to be one. I think there's a little bit of Aaron Rodgers and Pat. So I think it's the calm before the storm is what I'm going to say.
What does that mean?
So you think we're going to one day Patrick Mahomes will not be viewed as the guy who absolutely answers every question perfectly, seems to handle every scenario exactly how the organization would want him and sponsors would want him to, that eventually we're going to see him sideways with fans and media?
No, I mean, there's going to be a game where, like, I don't know what game it's going to be, but let's say it's the divisional. Like, let's say he has a game in the divisional round, like he had against Buffalo, right, where he can't miss. They win because he's the best player on the field, and he lets it out a little bit, right? And he lets it out a little bit, and he said, like, I don't know if he says forget Tyreek Hill or something like that, but like I think he's got some Aaron Rodgers in him when he lets that thing percolate a little bit. Like, the Packers traded up for a quarterback, and then Aaron Rodgers won 2 MVPs in a row. Like, I think that this kind of stuff motivates folks like Pat, who, like, for the most part, say the right thing and are just going to come in and try to flamethrow the league as a response to this. Don't you guys agree? I think that this is going to be a precursor to Patrick Mahomes turning into like a God mode type player because he's being doubted. When has Patrick Mahomes been doubted since his rookie year?
That's an interesting one. I'll take the second because no, I don't. I'm beyond the idea that a guy like Patrick Mahomes like is playing at 80%. He's got another 20% to go get when someone challenges him. Right? Like,
Yeah.
I totally didn't take that the way I thought. You know, my initial thought of how you meant it was not that. I think you're getting all of Mahomes. And I know what you're gonna say. You're saying no. I mean, he gives his all, but now, like, then what? Like the anger fairy gives him an extra 10% of juice. Like I would put it to Patrick Mahomes' response to those comments. This was predictable, right? Was professional, right? But yeah. I think he did. He said he was surprised, which out of Mahomes is like, yeah, I was pissed, right? And I think he'll show it. I don't think it'll be this year. I think he goes to I don't know if they go to Miami or Miami comes to Kansas City next year, but they will play next year. And he will, in that case, probably have a hell of a day. And we'll get something like he did when he played the Baltimore Ravens and Lamar Jackson had been voted the number 1 player in the NFL and he'd been voted number 4. And he threw a touchdown and went.
Yeah. Or like when he counted off 1 through 10 against the Bears. Like
against Mitchell Trubisky, where he went 10th. Yeah. Trubisky went number 2. Absolutely. I think we'll see something like that. But I thought he handled it perfectly. He handled it better than his 60-something-year-old coach who couldn't take it and had to somehow try to portray it like the media had gotten sideways, and Mahomes took it perfectly. By the way, with a small baby at home keeping him up, with another baby on the way, doing commercials, doing whatever. Where Andy Reid, I think we all would assume his life is just football, just going into the office. Mahomes actually seems to have a life. He goes to games. He goes to events. He's got a busy schedule. And he, at 26 or 7, handled it better. And that was absolutely predictable, in my opinion, that he would.
Do you think – I think the thing with Andy Reid, by the way, is I think what Jeff said, which is the Chiefs stuck their neck out for Tyreek Hill.
Sure.
And there's a little bit of betrayal, and they projected that betrayal onto Todd Lebo. Like they projected the feelings of that betrayal onto Todd Lebo, right?
Sure.
Like we've seen this all the time. Like, and not to say that the betrayal was like anything other than anything other than kind of a silly wide receiver saying stupid stuff, but it's still there's always that like I made you, and now you're coming back and acting this way. And then of course they take, and I think it's an embarrassment thing for the Chiefs, right? And so, and in that like sort of like embarrassment moment, they take it out on the guy, like a guy like Todd. Right. But like, I think with Mahomes, it's more of like, okay, like, and we've heard it. We've said it on the show before, like the last 2 years for Kansas City, every win has felt like a grind, right? Like they're just, there isn't that like secondary motivation anymore. Now there's like a little bit of secondary motivation. And I think like Pat, I think it adds a little bit.
Jeff?
Yeah, I think it was measured. I think what he said was very measured. I think he probably wanted to say more. He could have said more. But to your point, I think he's in a different place in his life. I don't even know if he's the same guy who's so caught up in what people think of him, because once you start having children and you start having that big contract in the NFL and you've won a championship and an MVP, you've checked a lot of boxes. And I'm not questioning his motivation. I think he'll always be a motivated player, but I do think you mature and you grow, and some of this stuff just becomes noise to you. Like Patrick Mahomes understands that his job is not to sit here and try to make Tyreek Hill understand that he's a better quarterback than Tua Tagovailoa. And I'm sure Mahomes said he had seen him, at the Miami Grand Prix 2 weeks earlier. And so they spent time together. I don't even know if there's going to be any kind of rift that comes out of this beyond this. I just feel like he was put in a difficult spot, had to answer some difficult questions. And Patrick Mahomes is in a place in his life where he doesn't have to be compared to Tua Tagovailoa. That's not going to be extra juice for him. I do think if it was some random safety or corner out there talking smack and saying this guy is not all that, whatever, it might resonate more and create the kind of motivation Eric's talking about. But I do think he handled it well. I do believe that it probably went in one ear and out the other. And like I said earlier, I think he just realized this is Tyreek Hill. This was coming at some point. He's trying to sell a podcast. He's trying to get his name out there and make some noise. And beyond that, it's not going to impact what he does this season.
I will fire up first on our next one. Orlando Brown was, and I'll do just the question, Orlando Brown was blank when he said this is the wrong year for the Chiefs to rely on a backup left tackle. Listen, I know somebody, I think I know Jeff Chadiha next is going to say correct. Something to that effect is coming from Jeff, but we'll see. We'll hold the suspense. I'm going to say Orlando Brown was out of line when he said this is the wrong year for the Chiefs to have a backup left tackle. Now, I want to be clear, not out of line like he's going to be released, not out of line like damage was done that can't be repaired. But two things. I've gone round and round on my radio show with a number of people. This idea, I think most people agree with him. Like, oh, you got to do it. But most people would have told you you can't trade Tyreek Hill. You've got to pay him whatever it takes. You've got to pay Chris Jones whatever it takes. Every star that comes up, the fan base, the majority of the fan base says you have to keep the guy. Tyrann Mathieu, you can't let him go. And it's amazing. And media people that I hear, because I talked about, like, I don't really think you're going to put that much money into a safety again. This, to me, was the predictable end to Tyrann Mathieu, okay? This is not the predictable end to Orlando Brown, him leaving. But it is a conceivable end. And I think the fact that I hear so many people say, you can't. And then when it happens, it was obvious that it was going to happen, right? They immediately do an about face. I think in the media people don't want to make a prediction, right? Particularly people. That's why Jeff is so good at what he does and why he's on so many platforms, because Jeff will give you an opinion, right? But so many people in the writing world, sorry, Jeff, but
yeah,
you get to carry. I always have to carry the talk radio. You know, you're just all you're trying to do is get some ratings or get some calls, right? Well, let me tell you what I think the stereotype is for the writing world. No opinions, right? The opinions are based upon what has happened and never a thought about what's coming over on the horizon. So they got to sign him. They got to sign him until they trade him. And everybody goes, well, of course, he asked for too much. And all the pieces get written and talked about that he needed to go. It's not irreparable. The Chiefs are going to sign him. I don't know that that's the right decision, but I do think it was out of line. You're going to get paid. But this franchise has done you well, like they did Tyreek Hill well. Why are you poking this bear, particularly when you still play for this bear? That's my view on this one.
I would say it was accurate. And as much as I question Orlando Brown Jr. and being paid a lot of money, he is in a great situation in terms of leverage because they created the situation for him. I don't understand. Well, I do understand. They want to win right now. So this is why he's here and why he has a chance to get paid what he can get paid. But a lot of teams in this league will take a left tackle, they'll draft him, and they'll give him a chance to develop. I mean, the Tampa Bay Buccaneers have Donovan Smith, not an all-world left tackle, but he's solid, second-round pick. Denver Broncos have Garrett Bowles. If you saw Garrett Bowles play as a rookie, not very good player, Pro Bowl player now. They could have gone this route and created an option for them. I just don't like, and I know people throw out Joe Thuney as being a left tackle option if he's not playing there because he played in one game against the Bengals. That's not a great option. I just don't think you want to spend 17 games with a guy you paid $80 million to play left guard for you playing left tackle when he's never done that in the NFL on any kind of regular basis. So I do think he's right about it. Unfortunately, the Chiefs are in a bad spot. Are going to have to overpay to keep him. But they created this mess.
Yeah, they did. And by the way, if you're catching us via the podcast, we stream live Tuesdays at 9:00 Central. A couple of the comments, Terry saying Brown is expendable. You're really going to pay him over $20 million a year. Gary said it's always the wrong year to rely on a backup left tackle. If you're part of the stream, when we do it live, you can be part of the chat in the chat room. That's via Twitch, via YouTube, and via Facebook if you want to join us live and not just after the podcast. And, of course, we always appreciate the nice comments, the likes, the loves. Does a lot of good for us. Don't cost you nothing, so we appreciate you hitting that like button, that love button, and all the retweets about the show. Eric, Orlando Brown was what?
Underestimating the Chiefs.
Oh, you think they actually could walk?
Is Eric McCulley? Is he out there typing in like an alias?
Love Terry. I love Terry's opinions. Well, we love having you, Terry. I think he's underestimating the Chiefs. Like, there's always, and we all work with these people at times that, are like, oh, this place would be lucky. This place would fall apart if I wasn't here. All this kind of stuff, and like, and there's always like, there's always somebody who says that kind of stuff who's expendable. I'm not saying that Orlando Brown, like, I'm not saying, if Orlando Brown would play for $16 million, that the Chiefs should be like, hey, don't let the door hit you. But if he's like, I want $22 million, like, this is a Chiefs team that doesn't care anymore. Like, they don't, like, there are no sacred cows on this team anymore other than Pat. And, that might be it, that, Pat might be one of, so here's I'll bring this back to the Tyreek Hill thing. Is there anything, because I know Orlando Brown and Patrick Mahomes are close, right? I think that is the squeaky wheel to everything I'm saying right now. Do you think Patrick, after Tyreek Hill sort of left, of course, wanted more money, that's not his fault, but then in a way, like, kind of betrayed him, right? And talk mess about him after he left. Do you think Patrick is, like, do you think the Orlando Brown relationship with Mahomes is going to make a difference, or Mahomes just goes to Brett, like, let's say, hey, Pat, does it really matter? He's like, you do what you have to do. I'm going to win a Super Bowl no matter what, right? Did he lose faith in these friendships that we believe supposedly matter because of a guy like Tyreek and how Tyreek treated him after he left?
I think that's interesting. I mean, I think they want to play with Patrick Mahomes. I think there was, Andy Reid's comments were something like, hey, there's nothing we can't get beyond. We talked about it. So, I mean, I think there was a call and a conversation had. The thing that for me, like, what I see happening, if I were to predict the contract, I put up Trent Williams' contract and I was looking at that, and his cap hits 8.1, 14 million this year. Then he goes to 26 million next year. Then they can actually cut bait and run. Tyreek Hill's deal is not for $30 million a year unless he gets $45 million in the final one. I see this, like, what is he? But I also see Orlando Brown being about the real dollars. And that's what could make this sticky. I think Orlando Brown is more wise to the ways of the world. And it won't be about, what the crawl is. It'll be about how many dollars actually go in his pocket. And that's where this could get a little sticky, because if you want to throw some fluff around out there and put some last year number that he's never going to get to, you can make it look like he got more than Trent Williams, a lot more than Trent Williams. But I don't think that would be wise. So I am a little more nervous that this could get sideways. And almost Andy Reid talking about how it's not anything we can't get beyond and all that. I almost like, it's a little bit of like, you're talking too much, right? Or you're feeling a need to sell that we're all good here, because maybe you're a little nervous that this one isn't going to come together.
Yeah, it's more of a wild card. I see Mark Cunningham ask. I mentioned the term mess. He thought it was a little bit overstating it. I call it a mess because they don't have a plan B. It's a mess when this is a lot like Dwayne Bowe back in the day when he was coming up, and you knew he wasn't an exceptional receiver, but he also was a guy they had to pay because he was a franchise player and didn't have anybody else who could catch the football at a high level, and they paid him. And guess what? He sucked the rest of the time he was here. Like this is what it feels like it can be with Orlando Brown. And the mess that I'm talking about is the danger in overpaying players that you know can't perform at a high level because it's costing you assets at some other place down the road. Whatever they're investing in Orlando Brown, they're saying, we believe in you to the point we're going to jeopardize or compromise ourselves for other talented players. And they shouldn't be in that position. That's all I'm saying.
How good is Trent Brown? Not Orlando Brown, Trent Brown.
Oh, Trent Brown? Probably the same level as Orlando Brown.
Yeah, Trent Brown's a fat left tackle.
Yeah,
like Orlando Brown.
Yeah.
I mean, to me, I think Orlando Brown's probably better, right?
Yeah.
And so my point is, the Patriots won a championship with Trent Brown at left tackle, and then he wanted to get paid. They let him go to the Raiders. He was a huge disappointment, and he ended up sulking back to the Patriots, and they got him for 50 cents on the dollar for what the Raiders had paid for him. I think you can live, and I think the smart move. I'll just say it once. I think you can play Joe Thuney at left tackle. I think you could play. I think there are solutions. I think it just drives me crazy. People act like, oh, what are you going to do? Like they're going to take a knee every time for 17 games.
I mean, they played a Super Bowl, and I know they lost. I know they got killed, right? I know they got killed in that Super Bowl. They played. They were a 14-2 team with the majority of the season starting 3 backups on the offensive line, right? Allegretti started most of that year because Osemele got hurt. Mitchell Schwartz barely played that year. Austin Ryder was their center, right? And he was one of the preferred guys on that team. Laurent Duvernay-Tardif was a doctor that year. Like, this team has overcome more than having no left tackle before.
Yeah. But they'll be playing. The only thing I would say about Tyreek Hill being gone and how it could affect this offense, I do think players like Orlando Brown can be more exposed without that element of the wild card, improvisational, off-script play turning out to be having a huge upside, and you forget about, oh, he missed this block. Oh, the DN was running free, about to kill the quarterback. That might be gone from the offense in a way that when you're asking your quarterback to throw on time more to slower receivers, it could be an issue.
Okay. Number 4, Jeff, the return of Jerick McKinnon tells you the Chiefs are blank about their running back room.
Freaking the fuck out about it. It's like they trade, they pick up Ronald Jones. They have Clyde Edwards-Helaire there. Gore is still in the mix. They drafted a guy, right? Didn't they draft a guy, a running back?
They signed a guy.
That
was really liked a lot.
They got a rookie in there. I just feel like, why is he here? I know why he's here in terms of talent, but you've pretty much made a commitment to a veteran running back, to a running back you drafted in the first round. I don't see where the touches are unless you're saying, oh, he's going to help on special teams, or he's bringing a dimension that you liked in the playoffs that you can't get from the guys who are already there. So I do wonder, somebody is not going to be in the mix, and I'm guessing it's either Ronald Jones or Clyde Edwards-Helaire.
All right, Eric?
I think that this is a very low stakes signing, right? So last year it was Clyde, it was Darrell Williams, and then it was McKinnon and Gore. You lose Darrell Williams. I think all of our opinions of Clyde Edwards-Helaire are lower than they were at this time last year. So then you get Ronald Jones, who I think everybody believes is an upgrade to Darrell Williams, and you bring back Jerick McKinnon. I don't really see it as much of a change. The difference between this year and previous years for Kansas City is, as opposed to only having 4 or 5 draft picks, the Chiefs had 10, right? So then everybody's going to be like, oh, well, they got a running back in round 7. It's like, well, yeah, there are going to be draft picks who don't make this team, right? There are going to be draft picks that beat out the Derek Gores on this team, because previously this team wasn't able, like, this team didn't draft a lot of players. So guys like Derek Gore stuck. And now guys like Derek Gore will not stick because there are draft picks and stuff like that. So, McKinnon, I think, he was a contributor on special teams last year. He didn't really contribute on the offense until the playoffs. And I think that that's kind of his body type at this point with all the injuries and stuff. Like I just think he's going to have the exact same role as he had last year, which is he's going to play special teams. He's going to be a spot guy for a while. And if Clyde Edwards-Helaire really struggles or Ronald Jones really struggles, he's going to step into that role as long as his body will allow. And that's, to me, I just don't see it as that big of a deal. Like I think, and he might get beat out. Like he might get beat out. This is not a contract that you can't cut, right? So I just think that they're increasing the talent in the room again.
I'll say that the Chiefs are happy about their running back room. I see this totally different from where Jeff does. I think they see it as a strength, and I think they feel like they're going to cut a good player. They're going to try to get a couple of young guys over to the practice squad to be there for depth. Maybe it's Derek Gore that goes back there. Like I don't think he's on this team, but it's $1 million, right, for Jerick McKinnon. It's basically a veteran minimum deal. And I think the other thing that's interesting about McKinnon is he plays special teams. Right?
That's what I think the value is. Yeah. Or maybe he does more receiver stuff than we think. And maybe they keep fewer receivers and use him more as a receiver.
Well, and I think that's, and I use him as a receiver, and I think it allows him to do something that Eric has beat the drum for. I think we've all, at least somewhat, but Eric has been the loudest on it. And that is stop keeping wideouts based upon kick coverage abilities. Right? We saw Garrett Dieter retired. Marcus Kemp is not on this team. Demarcus Robinson, who is a kick cover guy, is not on this team. I think they've said, okay, we've lost Tyreek Hill, but we need wideouts, and we're not going to risk him to injury.
We need real wideouts.
Yeah, real wideouts that are on this team because they can catch the ball. And I wonder if there's been an evolution away from one. Punters have gotten so good that there's not as many punt returns as has been in the past. Kickers are booming it out of the end zone, and you've been trying now to bring it out from 8 and 9 yards deep. Maybe there's no reason to mess with that, and so they're going to devalue their special teams. But when they do, Jerick McKinnon's going to be down there covering kicks, and he did a good job of that last year. And I think he does provide a guy who is very effective in the playoffs, averaged over 100 yards per playoff game in the postseason. And I think this adds depth, and it serves as a motivator for Ronald Jones or Clyde Edwards-Helaire, although he doesn't seem to be the kind of guy who needs motivation. But anybody who thinks like, no, I got this, I'm on this team, not anymore. I mean, I think that if I'm the Chiefs, I'm happy with this. I think I've got guys that can throw the ball to. I've got veterans. I've got a guy who can cover kicks. And if anybody wants to be a lazy fat ass in camp, you're gone. I can do it. I've got depth of guys that I've trusted before.
When's the last time this has to have happened, but when's the last time the Chiefs like cut a guy that was like a good veteran?
A good
like,
veteran
out of camp.
Right. That, like you're saying, which is the sign of a deep roster because you're letting go of players that are going to go play someplace else.
Like folks used to freak out when they cut like CJ Spiller, right? And like that kind of stuff. And who is the last guy? I mean, that's a good one. Can we think of who got cut and Bernard Pollard? I assume there's somebody.
Yeah, he went and played well. So well, yeah,
he went and played really well for Houston.
Yeah. But like in the Mahomes era, none of these the 53 man cuts have never been like if they cut McKinnon, everybody's like, whoa. But like that's a 30% proposition at this point, right? Like, and that's good. Like I don't mean it. I don't want Jerick McKinnon to lose his job. I'm just saying that's a good thing for a franchise, right? When a team is like, we're gonna let. I mean, like they might let. I'm trying to think of like Blake Bell go if the other tight ends are better than he is. Like they might let like it's always like Cornell Powell or something like that, where that's a surprise, but like letting a good veteran player go because they've drafted 10 people this year. Like Rashad Fenton was the one that Sam brought up on your show, Petro, right? And like if they cut Rashad Fenton, like that was a starter last year, but like look, you drafted 3 corners in rounds 4 through 7. Like there's a really and you drafted one in round 1. Like there's a really good chance they cut him. Well, not a really good chance, but a better than normal chance.
Who was that D tackle who was playing for the Bucs a couple years ago? Who was starting for them?
Raheem Nunez-Roches.
He might be in that category.
Yeah.
I'm with you. And what about along the offensive line? I mean, I could see somebody along the offensive line Austin Ryder's back. We've seen him get cut more, but I think at right tackle, Andrew, would you be shocked if Andrew Wiley wasn't back? You know, if they said, okay, Lucas Yang's not going to stay healthy. I mentioned when they drafted him, one of my friends who's a scout for another team said he was off our board, right? Like they medically didn't clear him. So if they said, okay, listen, it's just not going to come together. We'll walk away from him. Yeah, I think this, and that is a good sign, right? You don't want to keep a guy who sucks, but good teams cut guys that can play for other teams. Generally, it's not starters on championship caliber clubs. It's guys who go to the bad teams and they upgrade the talent. And so I don't think it would be the worst thing in the world if the Chiefs end up cutting a running back. They've done it before. Who was the Buck guy they had who went down to Houston, who played for the 49ers?
The butt or Buck guy, like
Buckeye.
Buccaneer.
Ohio State Buckeye.
Oh, Buckeye. The butt guy, like the ass guy.
Last year, just like 2 or 3 years ago. It was a 49ers.
Oh, you're talking about the running back?
Yeah.
What was his name? He fumbled in the playoff game. What was his name?
Oh, yeah. No. Oh, yeah. Niall Davis.
No,
Niall Davis fumbled in the playoff. Niall Davis fumbled every game, but
it's like Ronald Jones. They signed him in the
Carlos Hyde. Thank you.
Hyde.
Yeah.
Thank you, Quinn Levy. Thank you, Carlos Hyde.
And Carlos Hyde rushed for 1,000 yards that year. That's the last time the Chiefs cut a good player, or not a good player, but like cut. You know, Carlos Hyde rushed for 1,000 yards for Houston that year.
Yeah.
After the Chiefs cut him.
All right. So, Eric, did you give me the word for McKinnon? Those are the Chiefs. Or what about the? Oh yeah, you did. You did. I was last to go on that one, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Okay. So number 5, Chiefs need Mecole Hardman to be blank for the offense to be at its best. Eric, you gonna take this one?
Useful. I don't think they need him to be amazing. I actually think that holding out hope that he's going to be a legitimate number 2 wide receiver hurt this team. You know, Sam brought up on your show the stats that Hardman had, which is like, were actually fairly impressive. Like if you,
by the way, Sam McDowell, who is a columnist for the Kansas City Star on my radio show, is what Eric's referencing.
Yeah. The foremost Royals expert in the market, Petro, a close second. But the
Asa Lacy, was that the conversation I keep hearing?
That was part of it. That's
okay.
Trust me.
No, I'm just kidding. But like he brought up, like Mecole Hardman's stats were actually fairly good, and I know the Denver game he had the 100 yards, so that, you know, when Hill was out. But don't you guys believe that them holding out hope that Hardman was a legitimate number 2 wide receiver hurt the offense? Whereas if you just accept who he is, which is like a very good version of what the Anthony Thomas was, you know, what rookie Tyreek Hill was, then I think the offense does okay, right? Because you give a defined role to MBS, you give a defined role to Juju, obviously you have Kelce, and then you mix Sky Moore in there. And if Hardman just gets a spot for no reason and like it comes at the expense of developing other guys, I think it's hurtful. But that doesn't mean he can't be helpful to this team. So that's kind of, I think if he's useful, this team's happy.
I will say that the Chiefs need Mecole Hardman to be himself. This offense to be at its best. I don't think there needs to be, I'm with you, Eric. I don't think there needs to be an elevation. I think the elevation in the receiving core comes elsewhere. And by the way, I think if he is himself, for fantasy football players out there, he will do better than the 59 for 693 and 2 touchdowns. Because I think if he's himself, he won't be on the field with Tyreek Hill. He'll be getting some Tyreek Hill like plays. Doesn't mean he's going to be the target, but I think, you know, his best days have come when Tyreek Hill wasn't there. And it's one of the reasons why when I see what Tyreek Hill did or what Mecole Hardman did next to Tyreek Hill, that's why I'm like, I will not be on Tyreek Hill with the Dolphins in fantasy football because
you'd be silly to.
Well, and I because he's going to go way higher than people think. But even so, I mean, I think Jalen Waddle is receiver duplication. And Mecole Hardman was drafted to protect them. I think they believe that Tyreek Hill was going to make it through his situation that he was going through at the time. But there's no doubt they drafted a guy who was diet Tyreek Hill to protect themselves. And I don't think he would have been the pick. I think it might have been DK Metcalf if Tyreek Hill didn't have the situation going on when he did, because I think they like a variety of types of receivers. And so now instead of 2 guys or the same, there's 1 guy. I think he'll get the Tyreek Hill plays. And if he's just himself, I think he'll improve on the numbers from last year. Jeff, how would you complete that sentence? Chiefs need Mecole Hardman to be what for the offense to be?
Terry McCulley stole it from me. Consistent. I agree with both you guys that he doesn't have to be some all-world talent. He doesn't have to blossom into a player who's going to have the kind of season that's going to lead to him getting some big payday in free agency. He just has to be just show up week in, week out. I would even say maturity is a part of this. Be mature. I think be able to handle the position, handle the responsibility that comes with being the guy who's been in the room the longest, the receiver room. It's a different situation for him. And I've always, in some ways, defended him because it is a unique role he was put in with this team, not being a really polished receiver coming in, playing behind a guy like Tyreek Hill who does a lot of the same things that you want to do in his offense. And so this is his chance to really show that he has grown up, that he can deliver consistently. And if he does that, I think that if he's a guy who ends up with 60 catches, 65 catches, 800 yards, 5 touchdowns, I'm all for it. I think it's a pretty good year for him.
Let's actually – so over-under number of Chiefs wide receivers was 700 or more yards. I'm going to put the line at 3.5.
Oh, wow.
Wide receiver, not Kelce, wide receivers. 700 yards.
3 over 700.
I said I'll put the line at 3.5.
Okay, so you're not saying what you take.
I haven't yet, but yeah.
Okay.
You put it at
3.5. All this lingo, this gambler's lingo.
I'm probably gonna go under because I think in all likelihood 2 will emerge. I mean, I can see some scenario where there's 4 guys with 800, but I think that's unlikely. I think Mahomes settles into somebody. Hardman's his deep guy. His yards per target go up. His yards per catch go up. Juju moves the sticks along with Travis Kelce. Valdez-Scantling disappoints and goes for 450 yards. Or Valdez-Scantling becomes his guy. He likes him. He goes for 1,200 yards. And Mecole Hardman disappoints and goes for 450 yards. Right? Like, I think he'll settle into somebody. So I would take the under on that. I just don't think it's going to be this perfect distribution. He'll find his favorites. There'll be injuries. And so the heavy favorite would be the under.
I just really like this team in the sense that I could really see one guy emerging early, like Juju coming in and being the most experienced guy in the room and really doing well, and then Sky Moore taking over and just like being so good they can't keep him off the field. And like they both get 800, but like 600 of Juju's yards are in the first 10 weeks, and 600 of Sky Moore's are in the last 7 weeks. And then a guy like MBS, like again, like I think MBS is just going to get 700 yards in a like 91 game 0 the next, 91 game 0 the next kind of inconsistency there. And I think Hardman's going to be similar. Like I think what's beautiful about this receiving core is, and I always think about it, like none of these guys are paid enough for any of them to be pissed off about their targets, right? Like that I think is cool, right? Because there's going to be games where like, and so it's kind of like, I don't know if I'd roster any of the Chiefs receivers in fantasy football, but I think that the group is going to be effective.
I want to highlight a couple of them because I appreciate anybody having an opinion and being able to put their name next to it. In answering the question again, the Chiefs need Mecole Hardman to be off the field, Eric says, for the offense to be at its best. And Ollie says wide receiver 4. So in other words, the other 3 guys to make sure that they're in front of him. So I think that's of note. All right, let's get to number 6. Let's see, I get this one. Frank Clark will be an asset this season if he – I'd love to pass the buck on this. And if he'll be an asset this season, I'm gonna steal. I know where Eric's gonna go on this, and so I don't want to steal his.
Wow, I look at that.
I know what
Obi-Wan Kenobi like.
Frank Clark will be an asset this season if he's healthy. I mean, I'll say that, and that means no stomach issues. Like I'm not sure what's really going on with all that. I think health would be it. I'd love for there to be just his shoulder, his neck, and be healthy. I think he can contribute. He does set the edge at times. I absolutely think I know where Eric's going on this, and I really think the best Frank Clark will be somebody limiting how much he plays. There, I stole where I think Eric's going to go. I'm sorry, but if he's healthy, it'll help. I'm staying away from because I think Eric's going to nail it. Jeff, what do you got on this?
Yeah. You kind of stole what I was thinking too. If he stays healthy, I'll put a number on it. I think he needs to be above 6 sacks. If he gets above 6 sacks, I think that will probably mean he's around the quarterback a lot more than a guy who ends up getting 6 sacks. I do agree that Eric is already shaking his head at that.
No, I shook my head at the isn't in jail. If I'm
in jail. Sean,
I'm not going there.
Yeah, Sean said stays out of the courtroom.
Yeah, low hanging fruit here.
Yeah. So
everybody's on the mic for this one. No, I think if he gets 6 sacks, he'll be an asset. I don't think he can get there, but ultimately,
neither does Irish Mac because he says if he can touch the quarterback. So Irish Mac doesn't think he's going to get there either.
A lot of Frank Clark haters on this audience tonight.
Or realists. I mean, what is the latest on his LA troubles? Right? Like, where does that stand?
It is crazy. It's kind of been forgotten about.
If only there were a shock jock questioning Andy Reid at his press conferences, maybe we'd get to the bottom of that subject. Yeah. I don't know.
So what's Eric going to say?
My parents' dog, by the way, is making crying noises because you started talking about Frank Clark. That's how
his stomach.
Everybody knows. Everybody knows. I see, you hear that? I
think cut him. Is that what they said? He said cut him.
Yeah, cut him. I thought I heard that.
Yeah. I think I agree. I think with Clark, it's preservation of him physically, and that means playing less. And that could mean for the Chiefs. And this is the second part of your Orlando Brown thing. If you can take the Orlando Brown money and use it on something like or some player like Brian Burns or Josh Allen, and just Frank Clark becomes honestly, when he was in Seattle, he played a lot of interior and he rushed against guards, stuff like that. If you could somehow manufacture a nickel rush that has Leo Chenal lining up kind of wherever, Frank Clark and Chris Jones lining up over the guards and Karlaftis lining up over a tackle, and you can get pressure that way. I don't care how it happens at this point. It's the same thing as Mecole Hardman to me, right? Frank Clark has to be useful for this team. The ship has sailed on him being a franchise defensive end. To me, it's be useful. And I think the best way to make him useful is for him to play less and for him to be preserved. And so that means actually the point that my answer to this is somebody has to step up. It doesn't have to, it's not illegal for a guy like Joshua Kaindoh to actually be good. It's not illegal for Michael Dana to come in and be good. It's not illegal for somebody to step up on that team and be a good defensive end.
Somebody has to step up. I heard the dog growl.
I know.
That's what I heard on that one. All right, number 7, Chris Jones has to be blank for this defense to be vastly improved. Jeff, what do you got?
Another number for sacks, 12 to 15 sacks.
Yeah.
You pay him too much money. Aaron Donald is the poster child of this. You've got a highly paid, supposedly dominant defensive tackle in the middle of your defense. Got to play big. You've lost some key players. In years past, I've always had this defense really relied on Chris Jones, Frank Clark, and Tyrann Mathieu to be difference makers. One guy is gone. Another guy is a question mark. It falls on Chris Jones to be a superstar. I mean, if he can get those kind of numbers, this defense goes to a whole new level.
Eric?
Yeah, he has to be at the end of the season, we have to be saying stuff look, when Aaron Donald signed his deal, we're all like, no, that's a lot of money, but he's worth every penny. At the end of this season, we got to be like, Chris Jones has paid a lot of money, but shit, okay, I get it, and that's a 15 sack season. That's a John Randall season where he takes over. And that's we watched some plays where, George Karlaftis played at Purdue, he was being double teamed, right? We need to see games where Chris Jones is taking on 3 blockers and Karlaftis on the twist gets a sack. And we're all that's Chris Jones. That's Chris Jones. We have to have that kind of – Chris Jones has to be a force multiplier for this team. And, I think he's great. And I know, Seth Kaiser, who you have on the show a lot, is a huge fan of his. And I think a lot of people, he has the flash plays, and I do agree on the defensive line. It's about your wins, and I think Chris Jones's wins are awesome, but in my opinion, I don't think he elevates this defense. He has not elevated this defense above and beyond his own great play yet. And that is when you make that much money. I think when he was making rookie deal money, it's fine for him to get his 10 sacks, his 12 sacks, and for the rest of the defense to kind of be whatever around him. When you make that $20 million a year, you got to be the guy that says, okay, Karlaftis might not be as good as his sack total, but he's playing next to Chris Jones. The same way that Leonard Floyd is not as good as his sack totals, but he's playing next to Aaron Donald. That has to be where Chris Jones is. I don't even need it. His individual production matters to me less than he has to be the driving force for the collective on the defensive line to be. You guys said the 31 sacks last year. You need to get to that. You need to get that number to 45. And Chris Jones needs to contribute 15 of them himself. And there's got to be 5 or 6 sacks that other guys get that they would not have gotten if Jones wasn't as effective.
I'll highlight what Sean said here. He said Jones needs to be double teamed. It's echoing. He didn't say jinx on this because he was typing it as you were saying it. So Karlaftis gets 5 to 7 sacks. I think he needs to. I think he needs to be double teamed, and I think he needs to beat double teams. I think whenever he's singled, he has to get there. And I'm with Jeff. I think as the reigning guy, he needs to be a 12. But we'll get to Karlaftis' numbers. He's on the board, Sean. So stay tuned on that because I think there's a number there for Karlaftis as well. But Jones, I would say Chris Jones has to be dominant for this defense to be vastly improved. I mean, they set out to really overhaul the defensive line, and we've heard Brett Beach say, he kind of bristled at you don't value cornerbacks. And he said, listen, that's not the case. We just haven't had the opportunity. I think he set out, not with the same mission that they had to build an offensive line and protect Patrick Mahomes. But he set out looking to do more than they were able to do. Opportunity didn't present itself. I think in the coming years we'll hear, well, they were really after this guy in free agency, but they would only go here. Or they were looking at this guy in the draft, another guy to draft in the second round, but, he went right before they could get him. I think we'll hear those stories in years to come. So that means the guys that they kept, Chris Jones, they didn't cut, because he can't, frankly. Derek Nottie, who they brought back, all those guys, Frank Clark, they've all got to play better. To your point, Kando needs to develop. Dana needs to develop. All those things are true, Eric. I think you're absolutely right about that. But let's make no mistake about it. I want to be clear. Chris Jones is in a contract year, right? He's got to play because this year his cap hit is 29. His cut hit is 36. He's not going anywhere. Next year his cap hit is 27. His cut hit is 7. There's $20 million in savings. There's every piece of motivation for this guy to have a big year. And if in this year he doesn't have it, there is no reason to keep him. And I think then you get to work in a big, big way. If this team would, if Patrick Mahomes would go down and this team would bottom out and having a losing record, you reset the cap. And that means everything that's not nailed down goes. Chris Jones has to have a monster year and he has to be dominant. And I think he knows he has to be dominant or he's going to be looking for a job come next year. I think it's as simple as that. Anyway, let's go to number 8. Eric, you're up on this one. Trent McDuffie's rookie season will be a success if he blank.
He plays every game he's healthy. Starts every game he's healthy, and contributes to a good defense. Like you guys said on the show, it's been since Brandon Flowers and Brandon Carr that they started 2 rookies on the outside. There's a real chance they do it this year. And, the crazy thing is because they traded up for McDuffie, like he has to be the better of the 2. But I can see a situation where Joshua Williams starts. I can see a situation where McDuffie starts on the outside and they go with Snead on the inside. But he has to start. He has to start and he has to play well. And I'm not saying he has to be Marcus Peters as a rookie. Peters gave up 1,000 yards as a rookie, but he intercepted all of his passes and was really big, especially when they played some bad quarterbacks. But he needs to be like L'Jarius Sneed as a rookie. Like, let's just say that. Like that caliber of player better is probably required out of him, given what they gave up for him.
I want to say, there's a lot of ways you can look at this, but Trent McDuffie's rookie season will be a success if he starts all 17 games or starts 15 plus games and is first team all rookie, right? He was the 3rd corner taken, and you said, and there were lots of corners that could have been had at pick whatever they were at. I forgot where they come from.
21.
28 to 21.
28.
Right?
That's
Or
what
29, no, 29 to 21. Yeah, they went up to 21. You're right, Jeff. And I think when you do that, and you could have had other corners, he's got to clearly be no worse than the third best. And somebody drafted after him can be better, but he's got to be up near those top two guys, right? Like that everybody said. If they're better, okay. If one guy gets better, I guess maybe because, there's always the diamond in the rough. But he has to be. You cannot be trading up for a guy that next year you're drafting another corner because he's not getting it done. I think he's got to be a starting corner, and he's got to be no worse than the fourth best corner in this draft class, and preferably number 3, and maybe even knocking on the door for the second best because of the price that they paid. Jeff, your view?
Yeah, difference maker. He's got to change the complexion of the defense of the secondary. As Eric said, don't debate Marcus Peters, which is a whole different beast when it comes to turning the ball over and that element. I don't think he's that kind of a player. I was talking to D'Angelo Hall at that NFL Talent Summit, obviously a really talented cornerback in his day, and he talked about this guy's more of a technician, not an overwhelming, athletic, freakish type guy who gets his hands on a lot of footballs, but very sound, very skilled, very fundamental. And if that's the way he plays week in and week out for this defense, I think that's going to be a solid thing that you can build upon. Again, I don't think he's going to be the Pro Bowl in his first year, but he can make a Pro Bowl in year 2, 3, 4 with that kind of consistency.
Yeah, and that's what he's going to need to do is be that kind of guy. All right, that gets us to George Karlaftis. George Karlaftis' rookie season will be a success if he, and I will say, has 10 sacks. This is a first-round defensive end.
Man,
it's a first-round defensive end, and who else is going to get him?
Well,
right? Like I would back this down. He's not a failure at 9, but he's a success at 10, right? I think when you draft a guy like this, you want him to develop into a Tamba Hali. Maybe I'll say 8 sacks. I'll back it off. I'll say 8 sacks and plenty of pressures. I think you can't. He can't come in and be 3.5 sacks and he's learning and he's only done this, he's only done that. He has to come in and be a difference maker for this team, and there's every opportunity to do it because he should get as many snaps as he can handle, because he's by far the best guy for the job. He has to be, maybe difference makers but I'll say 8 sacks and a difference maker for the Chiefs. Jeff?
Yeah, I won't put a number on it, but I'll say disruptive is the word I will use here. He has to be a player who week in, week out is somebody you see on film causing problems. Yeah, it doesn't have to always be sacks because I think those are hard to get, but I do think pressures, run game, forcing fumbles. He's supposed to be really good with his hands. I agree with you. I look at their defensive line, and if there's only 3 guys you can look at and say they got to get those kind of numbers from, that kind of dynamic from Clark, Jones, and him. And so it's a lot of pressure to put on a rookie. 10 sacks is a lot for a rookie, but he's supposed to be a hustle guy, a relentless guy, never give up. He got to be that every week for this team. He's got to be somebody who is disruptive.
Eric?
Yeah, he's got to finish. Pressure. He's got to get pressure. I would say 50 to 60 pressures, and depending upon how many pressures he gets, like 7 to 12 sacks. Like they have to press. Last year, it wasn't just a sacks problem. It was also a getting pressure on the quarterback problem. I know that they missed a lot of sacks, but they also had a lot of plays where they just didn't sniff the quarterback either. And so they need to me, it's got to be 50, 60 pressures, and it's got to be 7 to 12 sacks. And, failure looks like him not playing almost every like 70% of the snaps, right? He's like, to Jeff's point, like, who else is there? He's got to play right away.
Yeah, I think that's this can't be a guy that we're like, where is he at the end of the year if this team is going to have a successful year. All right, let's go to number 10. Back to you, Jeff. Rob Gronkowski's retirement means Travis Kelce ranks where on the all-time tight end list? We know Gronk is now, we think, is done, and this is his final mark. What's this going to mean ultimately for Travis Kelce?
And this is just so we know, this is Soren tacked this on at the end of this just to make me look like the hater.
Well, I don't listen. Should I read your text?
Yeah, read it.
Yeah. Okay. So I
Transparency.
know. Let's see. Blah 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 blah. We talked about Roethlisberger. Maybe we do something on whether Kelce is the best Chiefs tight end ever, or if Tyrann Mathieu deserves a spot in the Ring of Honor. Still, like stuff like that is a good summer topic.
Yeah, like 2 weeks from now. Like,
oh, I thought you wanted it now.
Okay, well, we'll do it now. We're here now.
Well, we can wait. I mean, now we'll do it now. For an hour.
We'll do it now. Here. So just so I understand, you're saying where will he rank in the future, or where does he rank right now?
Well, I mean, Gronkowski's done, so we're getting one of the equations there, right? There are other tight ends. Tony Gonzalez is obviously one that will come to mind in everybody's, but Travis Kelce's got 7, got all his numbers and still going. So. What do you think? I mean, we can do a deeper dive, but
we'll do a deeper dive later summer. My top 5 tight ends, Kelce would be 5th on that list. I think he ends up 5th. To me, Tony Gonzalez is the best tight end I've ever seen in the NFL. The numbers support that. I think he's going to be hard for anybody to catch who plays that position. I love Kellen Winslow. Grew up watching him. He's on that list. Antonio Gates is on that list. And then Gronkowski's is 4. And so I think, Kelce would have to put up a lot more numbers. And it's, to be top 5 all time is pretty good, because I'm leaving off people like Shannon Sharp and Ozzie Newsome and Mike Ditka and John Mackey, that whole crew. But, man, I think to get up to be where in that level with those guys, I mean, those guys changed the game in a lot of ways in the way they played. And Kelce's been great, but I just don't think he's that level. Could be, but not yet.
Yeah. Eric, where's this put Kelce now that we know that Gronk is theoretically, and I think probably this time he's going to stay. He's not going to play with Tom Brady. I don't think he's going to play. Where's this put Kelce on the all-time list?
Kelce to me is like, I mean, I think Gronk's peak is better than any tight end that's ever played. I think Kelce's body of work is better than any receiving tight end that's ever played. So I mean, I know I'm a prisoner of the moment. Kelce, Kelce's numbers are unbelievable.
He's still 500 catches behind Gonzalez.
Tony Gonzalez had 4 career 1,000-yard seasons. Travis Kelce, and again, we're splitting hairs here. Gonzalez is one of the best players in the history of the franchise.
No, I don't.
But
wait, can I correct you on something?
Yep.
We're not splitting hairs the way Jeff reacted. Jeff reacted like you're insane. Not that you're splitting a hair.
Travis Kelce has 6 consecutive 1,000-yard seasons. He's the only tight end in the history of the NFL to have a 1,400-yard year. His game has evolved from a player who was mostly a catch-and-run guy early in his career to now who's mostly a wiggle around and get open type player. And I don't think that we have fully grasped how brilliant Travis Kelce is. That I think is, and again, I've been, even to the point where early in his career, he actively hurt the Chiefs with penalties and with being a hothead. And now he doesn't do that. He's a model player and a model citizen when he's out there. Again, you're basically splitting hairs with guys like Winslow. I think Gates was great. I don't think Gates is in that same ballpark.
Look at the touchdowns Antonio Gates has compared to Kelce.
How many what?
Touchdown catches. Gates has got 50 more touchdown catches.
I mean, Kelce's played for 8 years, and 6 of them are 1,000-yard season.
All right.
Bring the stats, Soren.
Okay, so Tony Gonzalez, I'll give you Tony Gonzalez. When it was all said and done, had 1,325 catches for 15,000 yards and 111 touchdowns.
Antonio Gates had 2 1,000-yard seasons.
Listen, all right, but I'm giving the careers first. Travis Kelce has 700 catches, so 500 catches behind, 9,000 yards, so 6,000 yards behind, 57 touchdowns, so 54 touchdowns behind. The touchdowns are what ding, Kelce. There's no doubt about it. He has not been the touchdown creator, but I will tell you he leads all the other tight ends in rushing touchdowns. because nobody runs the Wildcat as a tight end like Travis Kelce does.
I like Cameron Fletcher's point here. He makes a good point that if Gonzalez is playing today, he's having a lot of 1,000-yard seasons too.
Yeah, I would agree, and I think it's a good discussion. And let me add in here because I wanted to, who was the other one? Gronk's numbers: 621 catches, 9,200 yards, 92 touchdowns. Right, the touchdown total for Travis Kelce is pretty glaring on how low it is. So I'm not saying
he had Alex Smith was his quarterback for half the season.
Here we go. Gonzalez.
Well, okay, Gonzalez, you get that, but Trent Green was a better quarterback than Alex Smith, and Matt Ryan's a much better quarterback than Alex Smith.
Yes. And let me say,
and Phillip Rivers was Gates' quarterback for the whole time.
For the record, Travis Kelce's touchdowns by year 0 because he had the microfracture surgery the first year. 5, 5, 4, 8. Then Patrick Mahomes took over 10, 5, 11, 9.
Yeah.
Right. So he had 4 seasons basically with Alex Smith and 4 seasons with Patrick Mahomes. With Patrick Mahomes, he's had 35 touchdowns. With Alex Smith, he had 22. So there's no doubt the caliber of quarterback helps. But that's it. If we're going to talk caliber of quarterback, Tony Gonzalez played with a wide variety of guys, never with the Hall of Famer. Tony Gonzalez.
Matt Ryan was the MVP of the league.
I was like 36 when he went there.
Yeah, Matt
was
Ryan,
running up the score with those guys. I agree. Okay, I get that you had Elvis Gerback. I get that you had. I'm trying to think of you had Rich Gannon. You had. Tyler Thigpen, like I get the bad quarterbacks there, but what Travis Kelce has done is historic at the position, and it's not just even like adjusting for era. Like the guy is leading. The guy over the last 5 years has like the most receiving yards, other than maybe like one wide receiver in the whole league. Like he's putting up every other guy. It's like, oh yeah, Antonio Gates. Hey, 800 yards is great for a tight end. It's like Travis Kelce's yardage totals are great, period. Like no matter what position you're playing. Like I
like third all time now in receiving yards.
I mean, he played forever.
Well, that's part of it too.
Is he? Yeah, he's third behind Rice and Larry Fitzgerald, right? Larry Fitzgerald got him, I think. I'd say he's probably the longevity's real. I mean, if he's going to be playing till he's 38 years old. Then he's going to go down as 1 or 2.
Yeah.
Right now, I think he sits at 3 because your availability is a part of your ability. And the second half of Rob Gronkowski's career was very rare. He wasn't available much. And Travis Kelce, that being there, punching the clock every day, I'm probably going to go Gonzalez 1, Gates 2 on the body of work. But I do think if he plays as long, Kelce will be better. I think in the end, it's going to be 2 Chiefs. It's going to be Gonzalez and Kelce. Or if Kelce can play till he's 38, it's going to be Kelce and Gonzalez is going to be some combination there. But it's Gonzalez, and I think Gonzalez, as much as I love Travis Kelce, Gonzalez is still there, and he's still better. Period. Simple as that.
The numbers are so outrageous for a player of his position. It boggles my – and I get, like, Tony Gonzalez left here, and he talked a lot of trash about Kansas City or he
wasn't
better.
Wrong.
What's that?
He wasn't wrong about the franchise at the time, right?
I think he was talking about the city of it itself. Like I think he said there's more to do with
never mind.
Atlanta. More, it was more fun to be in Atlanta. So I get he rubbed people the wrong way with that. He certainly didn't ingratiate himself to the city the same way Kelce has, even though he did a lot of good things with his charitable stuff. But it just makes me laugh. I put so much credit into the whole body of work. To play in the NFL as long as he played at a time when you could have your head taken off by DBs and linebackers to put up those kind of numbers at that position, nobody touches him. I don't think you get much argument from anybody about him being the best tight end of all time.
Yeah, Gonzalez in this offense would have been impressive, to say the very least. It would have been very impressive to watch. Always impressive to talk to you fellas. Jeff Chadiha for the NFL Network, NFL.com. That's where you can catch his great work. Eric Eager's work is at Pro Football Focus, PFF.com. You can catch me at 810WHB.com. Thank you for joining us here on episode 37 of Red, Gold, and Bold. Make sure you hit those like comments, the love buttons. It helps us out immensely. Don't cost you nothing. We appreciate you listening to us here on Red, Gold, and Bold. Back at it a week from Thursday with our 2 Deep podcast, Red Gold and Bold, coming up in 2 weeks. And then very soon after that, I'm back at it each and every week. Thanks for joining us here on Red Gold and Bold.